chosen one. There are moments in life when you begin to question whether love simply passed you by. You watch other people build families, celebrate anniversaries, share their lives with someone, and quietly you wonder if your path was meant to be different. Not necessarily lonely, but separate, as if the kind of connection you hoped for was somehow delayed, misplaced, or reserved for other people. If you have felt this way, you're not strange, you're human. And more importantly, your story may not be finished yet, because one of the quiet truths about life is that love doesn't always arrive on the schedule society creates. It doesn't always appear in your 20s when everyone says it should. It doesn't always come during the years when people expect you to be building a life. Sometimes love arrives after you have lived enough life to truly understand it. And for many chosen souls, people who were shaped by deep experiences, reflection, and personal transformation, love often comes later, not earlier, not as a reward, but as alignment. You see, there is a difference between the love we search for when we are younger and the love that meets us when we have grown. When we are younger, love often comes mixed with projection. We imagine who someone is. We hope they will fill spaces inside us we haven't fully understood yet. We try to build a future while still discovering who we are, but life has a way of refining us. The years teach you things no book can teach. They teach you what peace feels like. They teach you what respect looks like. They teach you the difference between attention and genuine care. And perhaps most importantly, they teach you who you are when you are standing alone. Many people who feel deeply connected to a spiritual path spend long seasons of life learning themselves in solitude. Not isolation in a painful sense, but in a way that allows the soul to mature. You've probably noticed this in your own life. Your path has not always looked like everyone else's. While others rushed forward into relationships, careers, and expectations, you often found yourself stepping back, questioning, reflecting, trying to understand life at a deeper level. At times this may have made you feel behind, but in truth you were being prepared. Because the love that lasts isn't built only on attraction or timing, it's built on awareness. It requires two people who know themselves well enough not to lose themselves in another person. Two people who have walked through enough life to recognize the value of peace. Two people who are not looking to be rescued, but are ready to walk beside someone. This is why age doesn't stand in the way of real love. In fact, sometimes age is what makes real love possible. When you meet someone after years of growth, the connection is different. There is less pretending, less pressure to impress, less fear about being seen for who you truly are. Instead, there is a quiet recognition, a feeling that the other person understands the language of your life because they've lived their own version of it. And when that kind of meeting happens, it doesn't feel rushed or dramatic. It feels steady, calm, almost familiar. Like two travelers who spent years walking different roads, finally arriving at the same place. Many people think divine timing means something magical or mysterious. But most of the time, divine timing simply means readiness. It means you have become the version of yourself who can recognize healthy love, receive it, and nurture it. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're no longer chasing someone who cannot meet you halfway. You're no longer shrinking yourself just to keep someone close. Instead, you understand your value quietly. And that quiet confidence changes the kind of people who enter your life. Psychologically, something important happens when a person reaches this level of self-awareness. They stop seeking relationships to escape loneliness. They start seeking relationships that enhance peace, and that shift alone filters out many of the connections that once would have distracted or wounded them. If you have spent years growing, healing, and learning about yourself, it's not wasted time. It is the very foundation that makes lasting love possible. Because the right connection is not built on urgency. It is built on recognition. Recognition of character, recognition of values, recognition of emotional maturity, and when those things align, age becomes almost irrelevant. Two people who meet later in life often build something stronger precisely because they understand how fragile and valuable time truly is. They no longer take presence for granted. They no longer treat love like a game. They show up honestly, they communicate openly, and they protect the connection with care. So if part of you has wondered whether it is too late or whether love simply wasn't written into your path, take a moment to breathe. Life rarely moves in straight lines. Some souls spend their early years learning lessons that others only discover much later. Some hearts require time to grow strong enough to hold the kind of love they truly deserve. And sometimes the love that is meant for you is not early. It is timely, not rushed, but right. So continue becoming who you are. Continue choosing growth over distraction. Continue protecting your peace and honoring your journey. Because the truth is, the love that arrives after deep personal transformation often carries a different kind of depth, a different kind of honesty, a different kind of stability. And when it appears, you won't feel like you're starting life late. You'll feel like you finally arrived exactly where you were meant to be, right on time. And when love arrives at the right time in your life, something inside you recognizes it in a quiet but unmistakable way. It does not create confusion. It does not leave you constantly questioning where you stand. Instead, it brings a sense of clarity, almost like the noise that once surrounded your heart slowly begins to fade. Many people spend years in relationships that feel uncertain. They're trying to read signals, decode mixed messages, or convince themselves that inconsistency is normal. But real love, the kind that grows from maturity and self-awareness, carries a very different energy. It is steady, it is respectful, it allows you to breathe. You don't feel like you have to perform to keep someone's attention. You don't feel like you have to compete with other priorities just to matter in their life. Instead, you feel acknowledged, seen, and valued for the person you have become. This is something people who have walked long personal journeys understand deeply. Because if you are someone who has spent years reflecting, healing, and growing, you know how heavy emotional confusion can be. You have likely experienced connections that taught you difficult lessons. Perhaps you encountered people who were not ready for the depth you carried. Perhaps you gave love in moments when it was not fully returned. And those experiences may have left you wondering whether deep connection was even possible for you. But those chapters were not the end of your story. They were part of your preparation. Every experience, even the painful ones, refined your awareness. They helped you understand the difference between attachment and genuine care. They helped you recognize when someone is emotionally present and when they are only temporarily passing through your life. Over time, something begins to change inside you. You stop chasing intensity. You start valuing stability. You stop being drawn to what is exciting for a moment and begin appreciating what is reliable for the long journey ahead. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional maturity. Spiritually, many people experience it as a form of awakening. You begin to see relationships more clearly. You recognize patterns sooner. You trust your intuition more deeply. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to understand that love should feel safe. Not boring, but safe. A place where your thoughts are welcomed, where your vulnerabilities are respected, where your presence is not treated as something optional. And when two people reach this level of understanding, something beautiful becomes possible. They don't meet each other from a place of need. They meet each other from a place of wholeness. Two lives that were already standing, choosing to walk forward together. This is why the love that comes later in life often carries a quiet strength. It is not built on illusion. It is built on reality. Both people have seen enough of life to understand what truly matters. Kindness, patience, honesty, emotional responsibility. And when those qualities are present, the connection grows naturally. It does not require constant effort to survive. It simply requires two people who are willing to keep showing up. If you have felt that your path has been slower than others, remember this: some journeys take longer because they lead somewhere deeper. Not everyone is meant to experience love in the same chapter of life. Some people meet early and grow together. Others grow first and meet later. Neither path is wrong. But for those who have spent years building self-awareness, the love that eventually appears often reflects that inner work. It feels aligned, balanced, mutual. And when you experience that kind of connection, something inside you relaxes. You realize that you no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer feel the pressure to rush life forward. You simply begin sharing your days with someone who understands the value of presence, someone who respects the road you have traveled, someone who sees the strength behind your quiet resilience. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this kind of love is that it grows steadily, not through dramatic highs and lows, but through small, meaningful moments. Conversations that last longer than expected, shared laughter that feels effortless, support during difficult days when words are not even necessary. Two people learning the rhythm of each other's lives, and over time, those moments weave something lasting. A partnership rooted not just in emotion, but in understanding. So if you are someone who has spent years wondering whether love would ever arrive in your life, do not measure your story against someone else's timeline. Your path has its own rhythm, your heart has its own season, and sometimes the love that appears after long personal growth carries a depth that earlier connections simply cannot hold. It is not rushed, it is not fragile, it is patient, and it recognizes the person you have become. So keep walking your path with quiet confidence. Keep nurturing the life you are building. Keep choosing honesty, growth, and self-respect. Because the love that aligns with the person you truly are does not need to fight its way into your life. When the time is right, it finds you. And when it does, it will not feel like something you almost missed. It will feel like something that was patiently finding its way to you all along. If this message feels like it arrived at the right moment in your life, you may gently subscribe to Born into Light and leave a quiet like, so this space can keep reaching those who need it. And if your heart believes that the right love arrives in the right time, share that intention in the comments by writing "Divine Timing." And when you begin to truly understand this, something inside your heart softens in a way that is difficult to explain, because the quiet anxiety that once whispered to you that time was running out slowly loses its power, and in its place comes a deeper awareness that life is not a rose moving toward some invisible finish line, but a long unfolding journey in which every every split is strangless. Many people who walk a more reflective and spiritually aware path spend years learning lessons that cannot be rushed. And during those years, it can sometimes feel as if the world is moving ahead without you, as if everyone else received a map that showed them where to go while you were left wandering through uncertain terrain, questioning your direction, questioning your timing, and sometimes even questioning your own worth. But what you may not have realized in those moments of doubt is that wandering is often where the deepest transformation happens, because when life does not follow the predictable script that society writes for us, we are forced to look inward, and that inward journey slowly begins to reveal parts of ourselves that might have remained hidden if everything had unfolded quickly and comfortably. You begin to see your patterns more clearly. You begin to understand the ways your past shaped your expectations, and you begin to recognize that love is not something that simply appears out of luck, but something that grows from the quality of the person you have become and the awareness you carry into your relationships. And this is why the love meant for you may arrive at a moment when you least expect it, not because life was withholding it from you, but because the person who will walk beside you was also growing, also learning, also being shaped by their own experiences in ways that would eventually allow the two of you to meet with the maturity necessary to create something real. When two people meet after years of personal growth, their connection often carries a quiet depth that is difficult to explain to anyone who has not experienced it. Because there is less need for performance, less desire to impress, and far less fear of being fully seen, since both individuals have already spent time understanding their own imperfections and accepting the complexity of their own humanity. In this kind of connection, conversations tend to move beyond the surface very quickly, because both people are comfortable speaking honestly about their lives, their fears, their hopes, and the lessons that shaped them. And instead of feeling exposed or vulnerable in a frightening way, they feel understood in a way that is calming and grounding. This is one of the most beautiful things about love that arrives later in life. It often carries a natural sense of emotional safety, Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because both people have developed the awareness to navigate challenges with patience rather than panic, and with communication rather than silence. You begin to realize that love is not measured by grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but by the small, steady ways two people show up for each other over time. By the way they listen when the other speaks, by the way they offer support when life becomes heavy, and by the way they choose kindness even during moments of disagreement. And when a relationship grows from this kind of foundation, something remarkable happens within both individuals. Because instead of feeling like they must change who they are to maintain the connection, they feel encouraged to continue becoming more fully themselves, knowing that their authenticity is not a threat to the relationship, but one of its greatest strengths. This is the kind of love that does not rush forward out of fear of losing time, but moves steadily with the quiet understanding that meaningful things are built slowly, through patience, through trust, and through the willingness to grow together rather than expecting everything to be perfect from the beginning. You may find that this connection enters your life when you have already built a life of your own, when you have developed routines, responsibilities, and personal goals that reflect the person you have become. And instead of disrupting that life in chaotic ways, this love simply begins to blend into it, adding warmth, companionship, and shared purpose to the path you are already walking. And perhaps one of the most healing realizations you will experience in that moment is the understanding that nothing about your journey was wasted, because every period of solitude, every moment of reflection, and every difficult lesson helped prepare your heart to recognize and nurture the kind of love that is healthy, balanced, and lasting. You begin to see that the years you once thought were empty were actually full of preparation, quietly shaping your emotional strength, your awareness, and your ability to appreciate the kind of connection that many people overlook when they encounter it earlier in life without fully understanding its value. This is why age cannot stand in the way of the love that is meant for you, because love in its truest form is not bound by numbers or timelines, but by readiness. And readiness is something that grows through experience, through patience, and through the quiet courage it takes to keep believing in connection, even after life has tested your heart. So if you have ever felt that your story was unfolding too slowly, or that the chapter of love had somehow been skipped in the book of your life, take a moment to consider a different perspective. Perhaps your story was simply being written with greater care, with deeper intention, and with a level of emotional richness that can only emerge through time. Because the love that is aligned with your soul is not something that needs to be forced into existence, and it is not something that appears simply because the calendar says it should, but something that enters your life when two people have reached the point where they can truly see, respect, and support each other without losing themselves in the process. And when that moment arrives, it often feels less like a sudden beginning and more like the gentle continuation of a journey that was always moving toward this meeting, even during the years when you could not yet see where the path was leading. You will recognize it not through dramatic fireworks, but through a deep sense of peace, a quiet feeling that this connection makes your life calmer rather than more chaotic, and a growing awareness that you are no longer searching for love in the same restless way you once did. Instead, you are simply living your life with openness, with gratitude for the experiences that shaped you, and with the quiet understanding that the love meant for you is not something that was lost in the past, but something that has been patiently making its way toward you all along. And as this understanding begins to settle deeper within you, you may start to notice a subtle shift in the way you look at your own life, because the story you once interpreted as delay or absence slowly reveals itself as preparation, as if the years themselves were gently guiding you through experiences that would one day allow you to recognize a love that is real, balanced, and deeply human. There is a certain kind of quiet strength that forms in people who have spent time walking their path alone. A strength that does not always look impressive from the outside, but becomes incredibly valuable when it comes to building a meaningful relationship. Because it means you have learned how to stand on your own emotional foundation, rather than leaning on another person to carry your sense of identity. When someone has reached that level of inner stability, love begins to look very different from what it once seemed to be, because it is no longer about filling empty spaces or escaping loneliness, but about sharing a life that already has its own rhythm, its own direction, and its own sense of purpose. You begin to understand that the healthiest relationships are not formed when two people are trying to rescue each other from their struggles, but when two individuals who have already faced their own struggles come together with honesty, humility, and a willingness to grow side by side. And this kind of meeting, the kind where two people recognize in each other a similar depth of experience and awareness, often carries a quiet sense of respect from the very beginning, because both understand the value of what they have become and the effort it took to reach that place. There is no need to rush the connection forward or force it into something dramatic, because the presence of mutual understanding naturally creates a sense of trust that allows the relationship to develop at its own steady pace. You might notice that conversations feel different with this person, longer and more meaningful, as if both of you are able to speak openly about life without worrying about being misunderstood, because the language of growth, reflection, and emotional honesty is something you both recognize. And over time, those conversations begin to reveal something deeper than simple attraction, something that feels like alignment, where your values, your outlook on life, and your understanding of what truly matters begin to mirror each other in quiet but powerful ways. This is when love stops feeling like a gamble and begins to feel like a partnership where both people are aware that life will not always be easy, but where they also understand that facing those challenges together is far more meaningful than facing them alone. For someone who has spent years developing self-awareness, this type of connection often feels incredibly grounding, because instead of creating emotional turbulence, it brings a sense of calm that allows both individuals to continue growing without fear of losing themselves in the relationship. You find that you are still able to pursue your goals, maintain your sense of individuality, and honor the life you have built, while at the same time welcoming someone who genuinely appreciates the person you have become. And perhaps one of the most profound realizations in this stage of life is that love does not have to erase your independence in order to be meaningful. In fact, the healthiest love often strengthens it. Two people who respect each other's individuality tend to create a connection that feels expansive rather than restrictive, where both individuals feel encouraged to keep learning, exploring, and evolving, without the pressure to fit into roles that do not reflect who they truly are. And when you experience this kind of relationship, it becomes clear that the years you once worried about were never wasted, because those years shaped the emotional clarity that now allows you to recognize a love built on respect rather than illusion. This is something many people only understand after they have lived through relationships that taught them painful lessons about what love is not. But you, having taken the time to reflect on your journey, may already carry a deeper awareness of what healthy connection looks like, and that awareness becomes one of the greatest gifts you bring into any future relationship. It allows you to communicate openly instead of hiding your needs. It allows you to listen carefully instead of reacting impulsively, and it allows you to approach love with patience rather than fear, because you no longer feel as though time is slipping away from you. Instead, you begin to see that every stage of life has its own opportunities for connection, growth, and companionship, and that the most meaningful relationships are often the ones that develop when both people are ready to appreciate them fully. So, if you have ever felt as though your heart had been waiting longer than others, or that your life somehow unfolded differently from the expectations you once held, remember that the journey of the heart is rarely simple or predictable. Some people discover love early and spend years learning how to sustain it. Others spend years learning themselves and then meet a love that reflects the depth they have developed. Both paths carry their own lessons, their own challenges, and their own beauty. But for someone who has spent time cultivating awareness, healing old wounds, and understanding the complexity of human emotions, the love that eventually appears often carries a remarkable sense of clarity. It does not confuse you. It does not ask you to shrink yourself. It does not require you to abandon the growth you worked so hard to achieve. Instead, it meets you where you are and gently invites you to keep walking forward. Not alone this time, but alongside someone who respects your journey and is willing to share their own. And when that kind of love begins to take root in your life, you may find yourself looking back at the years behind you with a completely different perspective, realizing that the path you once questioned was quietly guiding you toward a connection that would feel not only meaningful, but deeply aligned with the person you were always becoming. And when this realization finally settles within you, it often changes the way you see every chapter of your life, because the experiences that once felt confusing or even painful begin to look different in the light of understanding, almost as if they were not random obstacles but quiet teachers guiding you toward a deeper awareness of yourself. There is a certain wisdom that only time can give a person, and it is a wisdom that cannot be rushed or borrowed from someone else's story. It forms slowly through lived experience, through the moments when you had to make difficult decisions, through the seasons when you had to stand alone, and through the quiet reflections that helped you understand your own heart more honestly. Many people who walk a thoughtful and spiritually aware path discover that love, when it finally arrives in their lives, does not appear in the dramatic way movies often portray it. Instead, it unfolds gently, almost naturally, like something that has been waiting patiently for the right moment to step into the light. At first, it may simply feel like an ease between two people, a conversation that flows without effort, a sense that you do not need to hide the parts of yourself that once felt misunderstood. A feeling that your thoughts, your values, and your quiet way of seeing the world are not only accepted but appreciated. And this is often how deeper connections begin. Not with overwhelming intensity, but with a quiet recognition that the person sitting across from you understands the language of your life. They may have walked a different road, but the lessons they learned along the way feel familiar to yours. They know what it means to grow. They know what it means to rebuild after disappointment. They know what it means to value peace more than excitement. And when two people meet from that place of maturity, the relationship they build tends to carry a kind of stability that is rare in connections formed purely out of impulse or attraction. There is patience, there is respect, there is an unspoken understanding that love is not something fragile that needs constant reassurance, but something steady that grows stronger through consistency and care. This kind of love does not ask you to abandon the person you have become. It invites you to share that person with someone who sees the strength behind your quiet resilience. Someone who recognizes the effort it took for you to become who you are. Someone who respects the fact that your journey shaped you in ways that cannot be easily explained, but are deeply meaningful. And when you experience this kind of connection, something very subtle yet powerful begins to happen inside your heart. The old fears that once whispered that you might be too late, or that love had somehow missed you, slowly fade away. In their place comes a calm certainty that life has its own rhythm, and that the most meaningful things often arrive not when we demand them, but when we are ready to receive them with clarity and gratitude. You begin to understand that timing in life is not always about speed. Sometimes it is about depth. Sometimes it is about becoming the kind of person who can recognize what truly matters when it finally appears. And perhaps this is one of the most beautiful truths about the journey you have been walking. The years that once felt uncertain were quietly shaping your ability to build something lasting. They taught you patience. They taught you discernment. They taught you the importance of emotional honesty. And those qualities become the foundation for a relationship that is not built on illusion, but on reality. Because when two people meet after they have both spent time understanding themselves, they are far more capable of creating a partnership that honors both individuality and togetherness. They do not expect the other person to complete them. They simply choose to walk together. And that choice, made freely and consciously, carries a quiet strength that can sustain a relationship through the many changes life will inevitably bring. So if you ever find yourself reflecting on your journey and wondering whether love will still appear in your life, remember that your story is not defined by the pace of others. It is defined by the depth of your growth and the awareness you carry into each new chapter. Your life has been unfolding exactly as it needed to in order to shape the person you are today. And the love that aligns with that person will not be confused by your age, your past, or the time it took for your paths to cross. It will recognize you. Not the version of you that once felt uncertain or incomplete, but the person who has grown through experience, reflection, and quiet courage. And when that recognition happens, the connection that forms will feel less like something new beginning and more like something meaningful, finally finding its place in your life. Not rushed, not forced, but arriving with the calm assurance that sometimes the most beautiful chapters are the ones that take the longest to unfold. And when you begin to see your life through this lens, something quietly shifts inside your heart. Because the story you once interpreted as waiting slowly transforms into a story of becoming, and you start to recognize that every season you walked through was shaping your ability to recognize a love that is real rather than temporary. Many people move through life quickly, chasing relationships that appear exciting in the beginning but slowly reveal themselves to be built on fragile foundations, and it often takes years before they realize that what they were pursuing was not true connection, but simply the comfort of not being alone. But when someone spends time learning themselves, when they face their own fears, reflect on their past, and take responsibility for their emotional growth, they begin to develop a clarity that changes everything about how they approach love. They stop looking for someone to complete them. They begin looking for someone who understands the value of walking beside another human being with honesty and respect. And when two people meet from that place of maturity, the relationship they create feels different from anything they may have experienced before, because it is no longer driven by urgency or insecurity, but by quiet intention. There is room for conversation, room for patience, room for both individuals to remain themselves while still building something meaningful together. This kind of love does not feel like a race to prove something to the world. It feels like a shared understanding between two people who have seen enough of life to know what truly matters: kindness, trust, emotional safety, and the willingness to grow together rather than expecting perfection from the start. If you think about it carefully, this kind of connection often appears in the lives of people who have taken time to reflect deeply on their journey. Because reflection teaches you something incredibly valuable. It teaches you how to recognize sincerity. You begin to sense the difference between words and actions. You notice the difference between attention and genuine care. And because of that awareness, you become far more capable of building a relationship that is rooted in truth rather than illusion. That is why the love meant for you cannot be measured by age or by the timelines that society constantly tries to impose on people. Love is not a deadline. It is a meeting of two lives that have reached a point where they can truly see each other. And sometimes that meeting happens after years of growth, after experiences that shaped both hearts in ways that prepared them for something deeper than what they might have been capable of earlier in life. So if you are someone who has walked a long path of self-discovery, if you have spent years learning patience, resilience, and emotional understanding, do not look at those years as something lost. Those years were shaping your heart. They were teaching you how to recognize a love that is steady rather than chaotic, honest rather than confusing, and peaceful rather than exhausting. And when that love enters your life, you may notice that it does not arrive with noise or dramatic intensity. It arrives quietly. It arrives naturally. It arrives in a way that feels almost familiar, as if your heart recognizes the presence of someone who understands the same quiet truths about life that you have learned along the way. You begin to share conversations that stretch into hours. You find comfort in simple moments. You feel respected not for what you pretend to be, but for who you genuinely are. And over time, those small moments begin to weave something stronger than excitement alone could ever create. They build trust, they build companionship, they build a partnership where two people are able to face life together with patience and understanding. And perhaps one day, as you look back on your life from a place of peace, you will realize that the timing of your journey was never wrong. It was simply unfolding in a way that allowed your heart to mature, your awareness to deepen, and your understanding of love to grow far beyond the surface. Because the love that God chooses for you is not something fragile that disappears with time. It is something that finds you when your life has shaped you into the person who can truly recognize it. So continue living your life with quiet faith in your journey. Continue growing into the person you are meant to become. Continue protecting your peace and honoring the wisdom you have gained through experience, because the path you have walked was never empty. It was leading you here, to a moment in life where love is no longer something you chase, but something you are finally ready to receive. And when that moment arrives, you will not feel late. You will simply feel ready. And if this message resonated with your heart, you're always welcome to subscribe to Born into Light, a space for reflection, growth, and quiet spiritual encouragement. And if you found peace in this message, a gentle like on the video helps this light reach others who may be walking a similar path.